Jim Harold's Crime Scene is brought to you by Scott eVest. Great clothing plus tons of pockets for your stuff. That's Scott eVest. To learn more and get a super special Scott eVest deal, go to jimharold.com/vest. That's jimharold.com/vest. Click on the link I provide there and use the coupon code JimHarold, and you'll get 20% off your purchase. Thanks, Scott eVest.
The crimes, the criminals, why did they do it? Who got hurt? Did they meet justice or commit the perfect crime? You'll find all the clues at Jim Harold's Crime Scene.
Welcome to the Crime Scene. I am Jim Harold and so glad to be with you. And today we are going to talk about a fascinating case in American history, world history for that matter. And we have a fantastic guest to talk about it. We are talking about the Pierre Hotel affair, how 8 gentlemen thieves plundered $28 million in the largest jewel heist in history. By the way, I should mention this happened in 1972, and that's about, I think it's 270 million now. And our guest is the author of the book, actually co-author, Daniel Simone. He wrote the book with Nick Sacco, who is the only surviving members, I understand, of the gang that pulled this off. And actually, Daniel is a great guy to write this. He was born in New York City. He's an American author who specializes in writing about sensational crimes in collaboration with one of the perpetrators or investigators of the event. For example, he co-wrote the Lufthansa heist with Henry Hill. If you remember Goodfellas, you'll know who Henry Hill is. And we're so glad to have Daniel Simone on the program. Welcome, sir.
It's my pleasure, Jim.
So if folks aren't familiar with New York City, tell us about the Pierre Hotel.
Well, the Pierre Hotel is a famous Manhattan landmark, widely known throughout the world. It's a posh, exclusive hotel, not too large, but very, very luxurious, and it has and still does host presidents, kings, and queens, and all the socialites of the days of glory live there because it is now has been converted partly to co-ops.
I mean, that's got to be some of the most valuable real estate in the world there, with that proximity to Central Park. Now, Daniel, you did the Lufthansa heist with Henry Hill. What drew your attention about this particular case? Why did you decide to make the Pierre Hotel affair your next book?
Well, first of all, I didn't do the Lufthansa heist with Henry Hill. I co-wrote it with Henry Hill.
Well, yeah. You didn't actually do the heist, yes.
I don't want to give off the wrong impression.
That's right. You're very law-abiding. In fact, I think I read where you worked on the Apollo missions, which I thought was a fascinating career change. But so be clear, when I said he does these are books, he does the books. So Daniel, why this particular case?
First of all, I was intimately familiar with the Pierre robbery because I followed it in the news when it first took place, and it was so sensational that it dominated the headlines for months on end. And coincidentally, approximately 2 years ago, the sole surviving armed robber, his name is Nick, and they call him the Cat, Nick the Cat Sacco, contacted my literary agent in search of a writer with whom to write about the famous Pierre robbery that he was involved in. And my agent decided that I would probably be the most apt author to write this type of story. And Nick Sacco and I struck a deal, and we began collaborating almost immediately.
And what's that like? And I'm sure, just like everything else in life, different people are different. But what is that like to work with someone who was actually part of a crime, who actually was one of the perpetrators? What's that experience like?
Well, first of all, I'll preamble the answer to that question by pointing out that Nick is currently in the Federal Witness Protection Program for an unrelated matter, nothing at all to do with the Pierre robbery. And he introduced me to the retired FBI agent who handled him when he did enlist in the Witness Protection Program. And that FBI agent very candidly told me something about Nick Sacco, and he summarized it by saying that the Pierre Hotel heist was child's play compared to some of the other sensational crimes that Nick Sacco was involved in.
Wow. Wow. When you're talking $28 million in 1972 dollars, to say that's child's play, that's amazing.
Yes, indeed. And he's an affable character. He's now, of course, an older gentleman, certainly harmless. Throughout his criminal career, despite the fact that some of the felonies that he committed were so sensational and of epic proportion, but he was always cautious not to inflict harm on his victims. He was not a man of violence. He avoided violence, and probably that is one of the reasons why he went undetected for so many years until the authorities finally became known to the authorities in the mid-'70s, several years after the Pierre robbery, and only because an informant brought him to the attention of the government, and this is how he was finally caught and arrested.
So back to the heist. One thing that fascinates me is the changing landscape in terms of criminals and how easy, quote, easy or difficult these heists and things are pulled off. What was the security environment at the Pierre Hotel in 1972? Was it well guarded? Was it thought impenetrable? Had they given a lot of thought to security?
It was well guarded, Jim. The night staff, however, was somewhat smaller, consisting of 4 private security officers, and the robbery was, in fact, meticulously planned to the extent that they were able to subdue and corral these 4 security officers, and, of course, they took them hostage along with the rest of the night staff on duty, as well as several of the guests who happened to have been roaming around the lobby when they forayed into the hotel, which was 3 o'clock in the morning. But just to demonstrate to the listeners how accurate and how meticulously the plan was carried out, the elevators at the Pierre Hotel are manually operated. They're not automatic push-button types. So on the night staff only had one elevator operator on duty, and of course he had been taken hostage. So anticipating that the possibility that while they would be holding the entire hotel on the siege, which took approximately nearly 3 hours, anticipating that during that period one of the guests may call for the elevator for whatever reason, Nick Sacco, my collaborator, actually trained and learned to operate those manually paraded elevators in the event of it was needed. And in fact, the occasion did arise when one of the guests called for the elevator, and the elevator didn't come, of course, because the operator was indisposed. He was taken hostage, and one of the other perpetrators was answering the telephones, and when he answered the phone, the irate guest naturally was calmed down by telling him that someone would be right up with the elevator. And Nick Sacco did, with one of his other cohorts, take the elevator to that floor where the guest was waiting for it. And, of course, they promptly took him hostage. But this is how meticulously they had planned the entire affair.
And also, wasn't this right around New Year's? I mean, shortly after New Year's, so it was planned to kind of correspond with people being there at a party and maybe wearing their best jewels and that kind of thing?
Indeed it was. It was perpetrated on the day after New Year's Eve, the night after New Year's Eve, to be technically correct. And yes, they anticipated that the guests' safe deposit boxes would be chock full of valuables and cash because banks had closed for the entire weekend, beginning that previous Friday afternoon right through Monday. So many of the hotel guests were left with no choice but to deposit their valuables and cash in the safe deposit boxes, and this is why it had been planned for that particular night.
And talk to us about the crew. In addition to Nick, tell us about some of the other personalities involved in pulling this off.
Well, the lead organizers were two individuals by the name of Bobby Comfort and Sammy Nailo, and these were two very, very astute, sophisticated jewel thieves who specialized in robbing expensive co-op buildings and exclusive hotels in Manhattan. And they went undetected for many, many years. In fact, Sammy Nailo had no prior arrests, so he was not known to the government, to the authorities. And these two individuals were the prime organizers and leaders of this band of eight. They were eight in total, who collaborated and orchestrated and rehearsed it until each one of them knew precisely what their role was, its function was going to be. And the other six individuals was a mixed blend of thieves, and one was actually a contract killer. But he was recruited because he happened to have been a close friend of Nick Sacco, but he was instructed very, very strictly that there would be no violence, and everyone conducted themselves accordingly. So not only that they ensured and took great care in making the hostages comfortable, but at the end of the robbery, when they were about to leave the hotel complex, Bobby Comfort gave a $20 bill to each of the hostages in appreciation for their inconvenience. And of course, the hostages thought that this must have been some sort of an absurd joke, but it wasn't. They truly felt that some sort of reward and compensation was due, and so they did.
And I mean, when you think about, I hate to idealize burglars and thieves, but in one sense, it's kind of like today you get the sense that, a lot of the bullets would have been flying perhaps, and a lot of people would have ended up dead. But these guys, they went in for what they went in for, and apparently weren't interested in hurting anyone.
No, not only that, but the public, and I recall this vividly, reading about it in the papers, the public had no sympathy at all for the victims because these were very, very wealthy people. And needless to say, the average individual felt no sympathy for them because it was reported that, for example, one victim, she was a socialite and lost an 83-carat diamond necklace that she purchased back then for $780,000. So who would have sympathy for someone who could afford to spend $780,000 on a piece of jewelry? And needless to say, many of the victims denied that they had lost anything because of the fear of consequences from the IRS. How would they explain having, for example, $500,000 in cash in the safe deposit box, or having $500,000 in jewelry? So for that reason, many of the victims understated their losses, and some even denied it.
Wow, I never thought about that angle of it. Now, organized crime ties. I mean, this strikes me as the time when the mob was still living large, and before all of the RICO laws came into full prosecutive effect, and John Gotti and those kind of things in later years. These would seem to be the golden days. I'm assuming there were some organized crime ties.
Well, yes. In fact, there had to be. In this case, the Lucchese family consigliere of that period, his name was actually still alive, so his name is Cristi Fornari. And Cristi Fornari was the person whom, on behalf of the mafia, on behalf of the Lucchese family, to be more precise, endorsed and sanctioned the robbery. And he also supplied Bobby Comfort and Sammy Nailo with some of his best armed robbers, Nick Sacco being one of them. But there were reasons why, when pulling off this type of this heist of this magnitude, the perpetrators had to seek the backing and sanctioning of one of the mafia families, because the mafia families would automatically have demanded some sort of tribute. Not to mention the fact that if something went legally wrong, an arrest or an indictment or an investigation, the mafia families had political contacts who could perhaps make an investigation disappear or perhaps fix an indictment, which is exactly what happened in this case. So for those reasons, a crime of that magnitude, which would have certainly been immediately known throughout all the mafia circles, had to have been sanctioned and backed by one of the mafia families.
Very, very interesting. Our guest is Daniel Simone, and we're talking about his new book, The Pierre Hotel Affair, How 8 Gentlemen Thieves Plundered $28 Million in the Largest Jewel Heist in History. And we'll be back right after this on The Crime Scene. Jim Harold's Crime Scene is brought to you by Scott eVest. Great clothing plus tons of pockets for your stuff. Well, that's Scott eVest. And to learn more and get a super special Scott eVest deal, go to jimharold.com/vest. That's jimharold.com/vest. Click on the link I provide there and use the coupon code JimHarold and you'll get 20% off your purchase. Now, what if you don't know what Scott eVest is? Oh, let me fill you in because I'm literally wearing a Scott eVest right now. They have great vests. They have great jackets. They have great clothing for both men and for women. And the idea of it is this. You want something that is stylish, that is well made, but has a ton of pockets to carry your stuff. You know, if you look back years ago, people didn't have that much stuff. But with technology, things have changed. You have glasses, you have an iPhone, you have a tablet, maybe you have a laptop, a water bottle, your keys. You have all of these things. Where are you going to carry them? And that is the problem that Scott eVest has solved. And I love my Scott eVests. And my coat rack is so full of different Scott eVest clothing. Actually, my wife is yelling at me because she needs somewhere to put her stuff. But I love Scott eVest. I'm kind of addicted. I can't stop buying them. They are so great. For example, I'm looking here at some of their top-selling products right now, the RFID travel vest for men. And they have one for women, too, both best-selling. Their Fleece Jacket 8.0, and I have that, and that is a fantastic jacket. I love it. The Sterling Jacket for women. This is great whether you're just a busy parent, you're a tech enthusiast, a business traveler, business professional, outdoor enthusiast, photographer, whatever it might be. If you're a person who has a lot of stuff and you need to carry it around, there's no more stylish, no better way to do it than Scott eVest. One thing I love is going to the airport and you have everything in your Scott eVest, whether it's a jacket or a vest. And, you know, before you have to get all this stuff out and put it in the thing, you just take your vest and you throw it on the belt and you're good. It is so cool. I love the idea of Scott eVest. And they really have taken a technological look at this. They have what they call bud buckets for your earbuds. They have a wiring system where you can wire your headphones through, where they go right through the jacket to your phone. That's your personal area network. They have an eyeglass pocket with a chamois cloth. They really do think about this stuff, and they've engineered it to the nth degree. And the kind of people who enjoy it, well, could I say Matthew McConaughey is a big fan. Steve Wozniak is a big fan. Amy Tan, the famous author. Andrew Lincoln from The Walking Dead. And Jim Harold, kind of the lesser of those. But I think that you will enjoy it. So check it out. Go over to jimharold.com/vest and use the promo code JimHarold, JimHarold. That's one word, no spaces, and you get 20% off your purchase. I know you'll love them. Thanks, Scott eVest. Welcome back to the Crime Scene. I am Jim Harold. Our guest today is Daniel Simone. The book is The Pierre Hotel Affair, How 8 Gentlemen Thieves Plundered $28 Million in the Largest Jewel Heist in History. And I mentioned this before, but I think it bears repeating. I think that translates to about $270 million in today's economy. So I think that gives you a sense of how big of a deal this was. Daniel, here's a question for you. You know, when I watch television and I see, for example, just a garden variety local bank robbery, I think to myself, what idiots. There's video, very clear, sometimes HD video of these perpetrators here in 2017. They are eventually going to get caught. What in the world are they doing? Now, of course, a lot of the security enhancements we have and video and those different things were not available back in 1972. And I'm guessing that this hotel, being what it was, probably had the best available but we're talking about 45 years of progress in the security arena. Can you talk about maybe some of the things that they didn't have that we take for granted today? And do you think, and does Nick think, have you guys talked about this, could somebody do something like this today?
Well, I'll answer the second part of your question. No, I don't believe that today this type of heist could be perpetrated. But despite the fact that, as you well pointed out, Jim, that back in those years, in the early 70s, security measures were not as sophisticated as today by any means of the imagination. But despite all of those misgivings, hardly anyone who attempted to carry out this type of robbery eventually would be apprehended and arrested. So even then, 45 years ago, it was an oddity, it was a rarity for a group of armed robbers to pull off something as fantastic and sensational as the Pierre robbery was and actually get away with it. Today, again, as I just mentioned, I don't think it would be a possibility, and anyone who does attempt it gets caught before they even leave the premises, as it happened just a few days ago, I believe, somewhere in Belgium. So, no, I don't think that this could be carried out because of the sophisticated technology that the government, the authorities, is armed with, and all the advent of computers and the data banks. So it would be an impossibility, and it would be suicidal for anyone to attempt it.
Yeah, it would seem very, very difficult with the different layering and so forth. I think that, and not that I'm encouraging this, but I think people are turning their attention to things like cyber theft and cybercrime and those kind of things. Now, in terms of the group, why do you think you said even back then this was a very hard thing to do. Why do you think they were so successful in pulling this off? What was unique to this group?
Because the leaders and organizers of the robbery, Sammy Nailo and Bobby Comfort, were very, very sophisticated and intelligent criminals. They were not, how shall I put it, they were not stupid criminals as most criminals are. They were very meticulous how they planned it. They did not overlook any possible detail, as I mentioned earlier, even to the extent that one of them, Nick Sacco, learned how to operate a manual elevator in the event that the need arose, which it did. So this was an altogether different breed of criminals. And they carried it out precisely as they planned it, even though some unexpected events cropped during the course of the robbery. You can imagine that holding an entire hotel with approximately 400 guests for 3 hours, you can imagine all the different possible events that could have cropped, and they did. And they were prepared to handle any possible contingency that arose, and this was one of the reasons why they were able to carry out the robbery flawlessly, without injuring or harming anyone, and getting away with it.
Now, afterwards, though, the road wasn't as smooth between the different gang members, was it?
Well, no, because as typically, and this is not unusual, they began disagreeing amongst one another as to how the hall was to be divided and shared, and of course greed also came into the picture. That became a factor. So the combination of the greed factor and the disagreement as to who deserves what, that combination became lethal, and several of the perpetrators killed one another, and that's really not at all uncommon. But of course, the survivors were Bobby Comfort, Sammy Nailo, and my collaborator, Nick Sacco. The others all perished in some way, shape, or form. And Sammy Nailo, ultimately, he himself was killed because he had an excessive addiction to gambling, and eventually the gambling debts mounted to such an amount that he could no longer satisfy his creditors, and that became his demise.
So in the end, it didn't fully pay off maybe the way that they had originally envisioned. Now, so the authorities, did they make some arrests, but they really didn't, quote, solve it? I mean, how did that work out?
Well, I'll try to be brief in explaining this, because this, I believe, begs to be told. Sammy Naylor and Bobby Comfort, approximately a year before the Pierre robbery, they robbed the Italian actress Sophia Loren at her suite in Manhattan and got away with it. However, an FBI agent who also collaborated with me on this project, his name is Matt Hammer, through an informant, he gathered and arrived at the conclusion that at least Sammy Naylor, or someone by the name of the Arab, as Sammy was known, he was known as the Arab. So this FBI agent was fairly certain that someone by the nickname of the Arab was involved in the Sophia Loren robbery. And through an informant, eventually the FBI agent learned that this man who was called the Arab was Sammy Naylor. And he arrested Sammy Naylor. And Sammy Naylor did not admit or confess to any wrongdoing, neither the Sophia Loren robbery nor the Pierre Hotel or any other crimes that he had already perpetrated. But the FBI eventually, through another informant, was able to arrest Bobby Comfort, who also denied any wrongdoing and did not confess to anything, nor either one of them named their co-conspirators. So at that point in time, the FBI abandoned the case, but the New York City Police Department did not, and proceeded to indict Sammy Naylor and Robert Comfort. But they really had no evidence to support their contentions, their charges. And at that point, but not to risk that Sammy Naylor or Bobby Comfort would be prosecuted and perhaps give up or inform on their accomplices, Christy Bernari included. Christy Bernari was the Lucchesi family consigliere. Christy Bernari funneled a bribe to the presiding judge, and the presiding judge forced the district attorney to allow Sammy Naylor and Bobby Comfort to plead to a minor charges of possession of stolen items. And this is how the case ended. So in essence, no one ever admitted to the hotel robbery, no one was convicted for it, and nothing was recovered but an 87-carat diamond necklace that had been recovered sheerly by accident, and for which the owner, a socialite who currently still lives at the Pierre, denied that it was hers. But with some legwork and investigation, the authorities were able to confirm that a New York Jew, a prominent jeweler, Harry Winston, testified that he did in fact sell her that necklace approximately 6 months earlier. But at first, she absolutely denied that it was hers, again, for the same reason that we discussed earlier.
Interesting. And it's very interesting to see the lengths people will go to maybe cover up certain facts. So I guess the lesson is, even if crime, and I'd love your feeling on it and Nick's feeling on it, that even though crime initially paid, in the end, it didn't pay off quite as big as they hoped, and things didn't turn out well. So you might have a short-term positive on it, but eventually, either life, even if the authorities don't catch up with you, life does.
Yes, that's usually the case. And in the case of the Pierre armed robbers, Bobby Comfort was able to retain a good part of his share, and he passed years later. And he died in his own bed, which is rare for a criminal to actually die of natural causes. They're either killed or they die in prison. But Bobby Comfort died peacefully in his own bed and left his family quite wealthy from his spoils from the hotel heist. And Nick Sacco, of course, he also managed to retain his wealth. In fact, when he enlisted in the Federal Witness Protection Program, he had amassed approximately $11 million but of course he squandered it on gambling, and now of course he lives on a Social Security pension.
Wow. Well, it is extremely interesting. One thing that I've read about this book, and folks, you've heard maybe a lot of the nuts and bolts detail of it, but from what I understand, Daniel's writing style, it reads like a movie. It's like real dialogue. It's almost like it's fact, but it reads like a good work of fiction. And to me, Daniel, that seems like some of the highest praise of all.
Well, thank you very much. And I do write in the what is called in the literary field the narrative nonfiction genre, which is the craft of writing a true story in the style of a novel. So it has dialogue, it has vivid scenes, and it's suspenseful and dramatic.
Well, if you're interested into true crime, I think you have to pick this up. It's called The Pierre Hotel Affair, How 8 Gentlemen Thieves Plundered $28 million in the largest jewel heist in history. Daniel, where can people find the book?
Well, coincidentally, Jim, the book was released today. It's actually available today on either Amazon or at any Barnes & Noble store. So today is actually the debut of the book.
We're recording this on the 9th. We're releasing it on the 10th. So, Daniel, congratulations. I wish you the best with the book. And who knows? And I'm not asking you to give up any secrets, but this sounds like a movie to me.
Incidentally, speaking of that, it has been already optioned for a full feature film for theaters. So we're very optimistic, and so is the film company, that by the end of this year, sometime in the late December, they will be poised to begin production of the filming.
Excellent. I hope to read the book and watch the movie. Daniel Simone, thank you for joining us today.
It's been my delight, Jim.
And thank you for tuning in to The Crime Scene. And although I'm guessing you don't have millions and millions of dollars worth of jewels, be careful out there, because there's folks looking to separate you from what you do have. So be careful. We'll talk to you next time on The Crime Scene. Bye-bye, everybody.